Now it's time to continue assembling the base, and for this we're going to create the X-axis mount. So for that we're going to need the small 6-inch end stop, 2 of the absolutely tiny M2 by 10mm screws. This should be the last 2 in your bolt pile, and of course we're going to need 4 linear bearings. So like before, open the bearings up and oil the life out of them. So onto this surface, the top surface, we need to zip tie all 4 of these in place. So we'll do them one at a time. So make sure the letter X is up on the top, and grab 4 zip ties. And from the back here, we're going to send them through. So from the back side, up, over and back down, up, over and back down. Oops, we need 2 more. Again, check to make sure these 2 bearings are sitting in that slot perfectly, because if they're not, it's going to be an issue. Then we'll lay it down. Gently do these up to start with. All going well, the bearings should be sitting nicely. They are. Rotate these over to get the end towards the inside, the large knuckle. Then once they're there, it's time to tighten them up properly. Now you've got to do it again on the other side, making sure that these zip ties end up towards the middle as well. So 2, 3, 4 zip ties. We're going to start with them facing this way. Two bearings should fit nicely in there. Lastly, for this guy, we have to add our end stop. So, with the bearings on the top side and the X up here, we need to put him through the hole and then up against these two little mount points and the angled tail, so the furthest most point of the switch should be almost touching this little box tab. So be careful not to get it backwards like that. Make sure it's this way with the end stop there, and then use your two tiny M2 screws to hold it in place. Job done. What a magnificent looking X mount. Now if you bring back your previous piece of the base, you see this guy actually will mount right in there at the front. And it's going to start looking like a printer really quickly. So the next step is going to be putting half of the frame on to hold all of this together. Okay, it's you buddy. So back to building a printer bot with Paul and Bob. It's time to get started on putting the rest of this body together. So as much as you want to help Bob, I don't think you know what you're doing. You're going to need two more pieces. The piece of wood with printer bot engraved on the front, and the left hand side of the box, which is the one without any of the holes. So get those out, cut them up, smooth the edges off, and don't forget to file or to sand the box corners on the edges. Just like you've done 100 times before. So, taking these guys, you're also going to need 8 M3x16 screws and 8 matching nuts, but we're only going to use 7 for the first step. So the first step is connect this guy in here, which is really easy, and then putting it on its side and clearing all of the wiring out the way. We need to carefully put this plate on. Now it's all started, I can carefully, and don't ever hit on the box joints, this is bad. You want to hit in between on the nice flat parts. And pretty soon it should look exactly like that. You can see there's still a small gap along here, but that's not going to be a problem for the bolts. So take 4 of your M3x16 bolts and put them in the holes that connect those pieces together. So they'll be all along the top edge and one sort of in the middle. So it's looking good. And at the same time, we can now add the printer bot piece to the front here. It's actually a relatively easy piece to insert. And use one more bolt to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. this side. And 2 from above the front here. By now you should have put in about 7 bolts, which means you should have 1 M3x16 bolt and nut left. I'm going to use these to cover the motor hatch once we've finished with the wiring. So flip this guy over, and let's have a look at this big knot. So separate the wires so you can see which motor is which. And then grab some tape and your texter. So we're going to have to label these motors so that we don't forget which motor is which. So carefully wrap a piece of paper around each of a piece of tape around each of the connectors. Making sure you don't cover the pins on the end, because we're going to need those pins to plug them in. And then label your motors. The one at the back here with nothing on the shaft is your Z motor. So let's get hold of him, put a big Z on it. And this motor at the front here that's got the toothed pulley on the end happens to be your X motor. So put a big X on that one. With that done, it's time to poke the wires through this little tiny hole here into the power board compartment. So poke them both through together. And I only need about 10 centimeters of lead, so if they touch the end they're slightly too long, just pull them back to about there, and then the rest of this cable we have to wrap up and hide in the back of this motor compartment. When you're done, you should have your nicely labelled X and Z motors hanging out here. And if they are slightly too long, we can always push them back in there now. So when we get to wiring, we can easily push them back in if we need to. But most importantly, all of this wiring here is all contained. With that done, you'll need to get this piece here, piece 1405. Well, that's the model number actually. Get this piece here with the left and right. Now it's important these two curved holes here are where the smooth rod's going to go, so it's important they line up with the 2 holes here. So make sure you have it the right way around. That's the back. That goes that way. And in it goes. Careful not to pinch any wiring, and gently wiggle this guy into where he belongs. And I know I said you needed 8 M3x16s, but you actually needed 9. So this guy goes on this side here. Or you're going to have to be careful to not drop this nut into the box. And then grab one more M3x16. It goes in this hole here, underneath the X motor. So this one, don't be afraid to drop the nut in because the stepper motor is going to stop it falling through. And you're going to have to use the Allen key because this guy goes inside a piece of wood already there. And then just don't over tighten this one, just do him up till it starts to feel tight. Because we'll come back and tighten that along with all the rest later. And that finishes that step. The next step is going to be wiring with our printer board in here. So, job well done. And it is definitely starting to look like a printer. Okay, Bob. You ready to do this? Yeah, you're ready to do this. Okay, so now we're going to finish assembling the base of the printer bot. For this step, we're going to need some quite exciting parts. You're going to need your printer board, which is in here. You're going to need the power adapter, little power plug. So it's a socket with some weird pluggy attachments, which we'll get to later. You're going to need the final side for the base here that will give you access to the SD card and the USB. You're going to need, obviously, your big base construction, and you're going to need the two longest smooth rods. So these guys are about 253 millimeters long, and as you can see, I've got them sitting on some nice clean plastic because we don't want them getting dirty. Don't be afraid when you pick them up to hold onto them properly because your skin won't scratch them. But be careful not to drop them onto anything metal or a table or the floor because if they get scratched, they will wear out the bearings really quickly and pretty soon your printer bot will stop working. Before we mount the printer bot, we need to get the bolts ready. You're going to need 8 M3x16 screws and matching nuts, and you're going to need 4 M3x10 screws to mount the printer board. So once you've collected them, it's time to get started. Put this piece aside, flip this over so you can see the inside nicely, and get your printer board out. So carefully cut the bag where you're not going to touch the printer board. And remove him from the bag. So always try to hide the outer corners. Don't grab the board in the middle because that would be bad. And if you look at it, you can see from the top, you can see the nice shiny SD card holder, and up here is the USB power point, and around the outside are the 4 mounting holes. What I'm holding here is the power adapter. So the first thing we have to do is mount our printer board. So turn it around so that the SD card and the USB are facing downwards. Fold everything else out of the way and then carefully place your printer board in the gap. You want these out the way and you want this cord here hanging out of the bottom. With that done, you then need to carefully get some M3x10s. Use your Allen key and start them all. So we're not going to wind them in, we're literally going to start each of these 4 bolts. So only 2 or 3 turns until they're started. Go around and do all of them. Now that they're all started, it's time to go around and carefully do them all up till they're just touching the board. Now if you poke the corners very carefully, you should see that the board doesn't wobble, it only just flexes off the bolts. So these don't have to be tight. Not tight at all. Literally just till they touch the board and no more. If the board doesn't feel wobbly, then they're tight. Step before you put this side on, so I've already put mine on, it's going to be a problem. The last step for you guys is to get this probe mount, which is this little circuit board here, and screw it under this corner of the printer board. So it's going to be kind of difficult for me to do because I've already got the side on. But for you, you should have no issues. The one thing to remember is there's these two tiny white plastic M6 washers in your kit. These must go in between this circuit board and the printer board just to make sure they don't touch each other, because if they do, it would be bad. So, because mine's going to be really difficult, I'm actually going to use a drop of super glue to connect the washers to this board to make sure, and another drop to connect the two washers together. This isn't structural, this is just so that when I'm putting this all together, it stays exactly where it's supposed to be and I can easily get my bolt in there. So if you do this, you're going to make sure it's all lined up perfectly, because a bolt's going to have to go straight through it all. So it's a good idea to wiggle a bolt around in there and make the gap perfect. With that done, I can now remove this top corner bolt. It's going to be trouble because I didn't do it in the correct order. Insert this printer board underneath the printer board. Carefully line everything up. Then, using your Allen key, put that M3x10 bolt back in. Again, if you guys do this before you put before you put this side on the printer, you're going to have a much better day than I am. And remember, only do this bolt up till it just holds the printer board. Doesn't have to be tight. Next step is to connect your X end stop. Across the bottom here we have X, Y, Z and E stop. Obviously, being the X end stop, we want to connect this guy onto the first one labelled X stop. Just simply bring him around and clip it on. Job done. How easy was that? Yes, it's going to get more complicated. Now it's time to insert our nice smooth rods for the Z-axis. So what you will need is some oil. And what I like to do is oil the sides of these gaps where the rods are going to clip in. It just helps the rod push in. What you need to do is get the rod top side here and slowly but surely wiggle it. Twist and wiggle the rod through. And keep twisting and wiggling until the rod just pops out the bottom of the box there. Then repeat with this one. So a little bit of oil to help everything flow through. And there we go. 2 rods inserted. Now you're able to put on the last side. So put him away. And then before we do that, we need to connect the USB plug. The power plug. To do that, we unscrew this nut on the back, slide it down, and then we insert this through the power slot, set the 2 wires through that gap, sit him in nicely, nice and flush, and then we bring this nut on the far side back up, carefully wiggle it back over, and get it to start. You'll only get a couple of turns before it starts to feel tight. And if you do have a pair of pliers around, you can use them to just give it a tiny bit more of a turn. Remember, don't be a Hulk, just a tiny turn and it will be great. With that guy connected, you've now got the hard part of getting all of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pins, 9 pins to line up perfectly with this. And this is why we haven't tightened the whole frame up, so we've got the ability for pieces to wiggle around. Once this goes on, you'll need to use 8 M16 bolts to secure it all together. Okay, with these all done, it's time to add those last 8 M3x16 bolts and nuts. Be careful not to lose too many nuts inside of the case, because if you do lose them, you'll have to go find them. So we can't afford to have a whole bunch of pieces floating around the inside of the Printrbot. There's one in here that is going to cause you a lot of fun. So this one's definitely one that we need to drop the nut in with a pair of pliers, but you'll also want the bolt ready to catch this guy. If he goes too far, you'll have to shake him out and try again. With these all in place, it's time to start tightening your Printrbot down. So, firstly, start by getting them all up to almost tight. There's 8 on this side to tighten to start with. Flip him over, there's 8 on this side to tighten. If we look at the top, there's 4, it's this guy here. 3, sorry, 1, 2, 3. Underneath, there's this guy inside this X hole. And lastly, go back to this side and make sure all of the original side is tight. And there we have it. That's the base of our Printrbot. It's looking good. Now, to get these wires out the way, we simply just tuck them up inside for now. Keep them out the way, stop them causing trouble. You should be able to sit your printer bot up nicely like that and marvel at your